Some mornings don't rise, they simply endure. That day in Dust Haven, the sky hung the color of cooled gunmetal, silent and hollow as an abandoned prayer. Wind dragged its feet across the empty railway platform, whistling through the splintered boards like a tired ghost searching for a name it once loved. Eleanor Hartwell stood there, barely standing at all, her body swaying like a fence post after a long storm. Hunger had carved shadows along her ribs, but it was the shame that hollowed her most. Her children leaned against her skirt, too weak to cry, too polite to complain. May, 9 years old, all bone and wisdom, kept one hand over her little brother Jonah's ear each time the wind howled. Jonah didn't understand hunger the way adults did. He still believed every sunrise promised a meal. But today, on the 5th day without one, he no longer asked. "Ma," he whispered, lips pale and cracked. "Do you think God forgot where we are?" Ella swallowed. Even that hurt. "No, sweetheart," she breathed. "Sometimes he just walks slow." The truth was uglier. Her God had grown quiet the day her husband's body was lowered into the Wyoming clay. A ranch accident, they said. Quick, merciful. As if mercy ever left widows with babies and debt collectors. She should have stayed in Bridger's Crossing, but starvation leaves little room for pride, and even less for options. Dust Haven was supposed to be a fresh start, a place that whispered survival. Instead, it stared. Ella tightened her grip on her carpetbag, though it held no food, no money, only a worn Bible, her marriage certificate, and the last dress she owned not patched at the knees. She hadn't planned to beg. She swore she never would. But mothers learn quickly. Vows crumble long before children do. The town awakened slow, screen doors creaking, shop signs clacking, boots dragging through packed dirt. But when eyes landed on Ella and her children, the street shifted. Not aloud. Just beneath the breath. Whispers scattered like dry leaves. Another stray widow. Probably wants charity. Someone should send her on. Ella kept her chin lifted, though the weight of judgment felt heavier than Jonah in her arms. Dust Haven wasn't cruel, it was just tired. And tired folks guarded what little they had. She stepped toward the bakery, hand trembling like a leaf clinging to its final stem. The smell, yeast, butter, warmth, nearly dropped her to her knees. Martha DeWitt stood behind the counter, her apron starched, her smile as brittle as old porcelain. "Ma'am," Ella whispered, voice barely air, I could scrub floors, wash dishes, anything. Just a bit of bread for the children." Martha's smile widened, but not with kindness. "Work requires strength, dear. You don't look like you have much left." She glanced at the children. "Try the church. They keep a prayer list." Ella blinked slowly, to keep the tears from falling, not to keep dignity. Dignity had left days ago. "Thank you," she whispered, though gratitude had no place in the sentence. She turned, pushing Jonah forward gently, when Sheriff Amos Kincaid's boots appeared before her. He wasn't unkind, just worn smooth by this land, by need, by fairness he could no longer afford. "Ma'am," he said, tipping his hat. "Dust Haven's got its own hungry mouths. Best move along before trouble starts. Winter's lean enough." Ella nodded. Not because she agreed, but because fighting requires fuel, and starvation had stolen even that. They left the boardwalk, and Dust Haven exhaled as though relieved to have passed a test. The prairie stretched beyond town, wide and indifferent, an ocean of brittle grass and yellow dust. May stumbled, catching herself with a hand that looked too small for such strength. Ella lifted her chin toward the clouds, flat, unmoving things. "Maybe God doesn't walk slow," she murmured. "Maybe he's just tired of following me." Jonah tugged her sleeve. "Mama, my tummy hurts so much. Can I sleep?" "Not here," she wanted to say. "Not yet. Not while you still wake up breathing." Instead, she gathered both children toward an abandoned wagon, wood rotting, wheel collapsed, useful only as shade. She sat them in the slanted shadow, brushed dust from their hair, humming a lullaby she barely remembered. The soft tune cracked like dry branches. She looked at the empty land ahead and realized, with a slow, sinking ache, she had nowhere left to walk. The wind rose again, and Ella closed her eyes, letting it take whatever pieces of her still felt breakable. That was when she noticed him. Not by sound. Men like him didn't announce themselves. but by presence, still and steady, like a mountain deciding whether to remain part of the earth. A lone rancher on horseback, sitting a respectful distance away. His hat brim shadowed his eyes, but his posture, straight, patient, said he'd been watching for a while. Calder Boone. Everyone in Dust Haven knew the name. Widowed. Lived miles outside town. Spoke only when a sentence needed him. To Ella, he looked like a man carved from drought and storms, sun-cracked skin, hands thick with work, shoulders carrying something invisible. He dismounted, slow, careful, like approaching a wild animal he had no intention of scaring. He didn't reach for a weapon. Didn't reach for her children. Didn't reach for her. Instead, he opened his saddlebags and removed a single loaf of bread. Wrapped in cloth. Fresh, warm. Fragrant enough to bring tears. He walked forward until he stood 3 paces away, far enough to leave her pride intact, close enough to offer salvation. Ella's voice came out in a whisper, too thin for the wind to carry. "We haven't eaten in 5 days." The words weren't confession, they were surrender. Calder didn't gasp. Didn't pity. Didn't preach. He simply set the bread on the ground between them, stepped back, and nodded, an invitation, not charity. May reached for it first, but she paused, waiting for permission. Ella gave it with a small nod. The children ate slowly, savoring every crumb as though it were a memory slipping through their fingers. Ella didn't touch it, not yet. Shame can fill a stomach far quicker than food. Calder looked away while they ate, letting them have their dignity. His silence felt softer than any prayer she'd known. When they finished, he finally spoke, voice low, weathered, honest. No one should starve in a land this wide. Ella's throat tightened. Not at the sentence, at the conviction inside it. No rescue. No promises. Just a truth the world had forgotten. For the first time in weeks, Ella felt seen, not as a burden, but as a human being still worth saving. And under that hollow western sky, something shifted, quiet as a breath, powerful as rainfall after drought. Hope didn't return all at once. It came crumb by crumb. Night arrived without ceremony, just a slow dimming, as though someone wiped the sky clean of color. The prairie wind softened, turning from warning to lullaby, and Calder Boone led his horse alongside Ella as if escorting a fragile secret. He didn't urge her to follow. He simply walked, steady and unhurried, trusting she'd choose whatever direction dignity allowed. And she did, because the only thing heavier than hunger was the fear of returning to town. "Just a place to rest," he finally said, voice quiet enough to respect silence. "Kids'll sleep warmer." It wasn't kindness spoken like charity, it was logistics, offered with the reverence of a prayer. Ella nodded. Even that small gesture felt monumental, like stepping onto a frozen river hoping the ice would hold. May and Jonah trailed close, their small hands clutching the hem of her skirt like forgotten Christmas ribbons. They walked through a world washed in moon-tarnished silver. Sagebrush drifted against their feet. Coyotes sang far off, lonely, not threatening. And Ella realized she wasn't afraid of the dark. Hunger had already swallowed every fear except one, failing the children who believed she could still save them. Calder's ranch appeared slowly, as if the land had been keeping it hidden until trust was earned. A weather-beaten barn, a modest house with a leaning porch, a corral that seemed to sigh under the weight of dust and time. No extravagant wealth, just survival done honestly. "That's home?" Jonah asked, awe slipping into his voice like sunlight through clouds. Calder nodded. "Been empty too long." Ella heard the echo. Loneliness wore the same boots in every household. He guided them to the barn first. Inside, hay rested like gold beneath amber lantern light. The air smelled of horses, leather, and reassurance, warm, living smells Ella hadn't breathed in months. "There's blankets in that trunk," Calder said, removing his hat. "Water pump outside. Sleep as long as you need." May touched the blanket like it was velvet from a royal carriage. Jonah lay down before being told, eyelids fluttering in surrender. Ella tucked them in, smoothing their hair, memorizing their breaths, proof that motherhood had outrun death one more day. She turned, intending to thank Calder, but found him already walking toward the house, giving her privacy, not distance. She whispered anyway, voice trembling but whole, "Thank you." A pause, then a nod, barely visible in lamplight. Mercy doesn't always bow. Sometimes it simply keeps walking. Morning didn't greet them with triumph. It approached quietly, respectful of exhaustion. Pale yellow dawn leaked through the barn slats, landing on Ella's cheeks like a benediction. Her stomach growled, still empty, but no longer desperate. Hope takes up space too, she realized. The children woke smiling for the first time in weeks. That alone felt like wealth. They stepped out to find Calder near the pump, sleeves rolled, washing his hands after feeding horses. A pot of beans simmered on a fire like a promise someone intended to keep. He didn't beckon them closer, just set 3 tin bowls beside the stump and walked away. Ella recognized the gesture, dignity disguised as breakfast. She approached cautiously, waiting for permission, but May sat first, back straight, trying to pretend she had always belonged to mornings like these. Jonah dug in with grateful abandon, humming a little tune between bites. Ella ate last, slow, reverent, tasting more than food. Safety, warmth, delayed relief. Tears fell without her blessing, soft and unhurried. When she looked up, Calder was repairing a fence post, eyes fixed on his work. He had seen the tears, she felt it, but he offered no embarrassment. His silence felt like shelter. Dusthaven learned of the widow before noon. Dust has a way of carrying rumors as easily as wind carries seed. Fast, aimless, eager to root in places it doesn't belong. By the time Ella reached town to buy soap and thread, paid for with the coins Calder had quietly left near the barn door, people were waiting. Martha DeWitt stood outside the church steps, arms folded, pity sharpened into judgment. "He took you in?" she asked loudly enough for passers-by to hear. "A widow living under a man's roof, without marriage? That's hardly decent, dear." Ella felt the eyes gather, hungry, curious, never kind. Her throat tightened, not from shame, but from the exhaustion of carrying it alone for so long. "I'm working for shelter," she replied, though Calder had never asked for work. "Nothing indecent in survival." Martha sniffed. "There are proper ways to survive." Ella almost laughed. Proper ways required options. She had none. A woman holding a basket muttered, "Ranchers fall easy for a pretty face." Another answered, "Or she cornered him with those children." Ella stepped back, not retreating, just remembering how small a mother can feel when the world decides she's taking up too much space. She returned to the ranch in silence. Calder found her sitting outside the barn, knees pulled tight, breath shaking like a fence about to give. He didn't ask what happened. Prairie winds had probably carried the story home before she did. He sat beside her, leaving 2 feet between them, the respectful distance of strangers who may someday be something else. "Towns talk," he said. "They always have," she whispered. "It's cheaper than bread." A small, fleeting smile tugged at his mouth, not amusement, but understanding. "You and the children can stay," Calder continued, voice firm, anchored. "Not because of what they say. Because you need to." Ella stared at him then, really looked. His hands were rough, scarred, capable. His eyes weren't warm, but steady, like river stones that had weathered every season and still chose to remain. "Why?" she asked, barely audible. A long silence. Finally, "Because no one helped me when they should have." He didn't elaborate. The pain in his voice had fences around it. Ella nodded, not prying further. They both knew wounds become louder when named. Life began to quiet into rhythm. May followed Calder like a shadow, asking questions about horses, tools, the color of sage after rain. Jonah pretended every chore was a heroic quest, earning praise with missing teeth and dusty boots. Ella swept the barn, folded blankets, mended saddle straps, tasks so simple they felt sacred. Purpose was nourishment too. Some evenings, Calder would sit on the porch while Ella braided May's hair and Jonah counted stars. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. Shared silence can be more intimate than confession. One night, Calder set a patched coat on the railing, hers. Soft, warm, sleeves hemmed to fit. "I had thread left over," he muttered. Ella ran her fingers along the stitching. Steady, careful work. She realized he'd learned her measurements from watching her carry her children, not from staring. That kind of noticing was rarer than love. She wanted to thank him with a sentence, a gesture, a lifetime, but hunger had taken language from her long before food had. So she did the only thing she could, placed her hand over her heart and bowed her head. Calder nodded, tipping his hat, as if accepting the most valuable payment he'd ever received. But peace never lasts long in places built from dust and pride. One afternoon, a rider galloped from town, Sheriff Amos Kincaid, coat flapping like a warning flag. He dismounted, boots heavy, jaw set with something cold. "You've stirred up trouble, Boone," he said. "Town council wants her gone." Ella felt the earth tilt beneath her. "You've stirred up trouble, Boone," he said. "Town council wants her gone." Ella felt the earth tilt beneath her. Jonah clung to her skirt. May held her breath. Calder didn't move. Didn't blink. The sky seemed to wait on his answer. "We'll handle it," he said quietly. But Ella already knew, storms don't ask permission before they arrive. And for the first time since her husband died, she wasn't afraid of the storm. She was afraid of losing the calm she'd finally found. Sheriff Kincaid waited on the porch like a man holding a sentence he didn't want to speak. His hat stayed clasped in his hands, not out of respect, but discomfort. The wind had gone still, as though even the prairie refused to interrupt. Ella stepped forward before Calder could answer, spine straightening like a spine, remembering it had once held a woman, not just a mother. "If Dusthaven wants us gone," she said softly, "we'll leave at first light." Jonah gasped. May's face crumpled. Calder's jaw tightened, not in anger, but in disbelief. Kincaid shook his head. "Wasn't what I came to say. Council demands you leave tonight." That word, demands, struck harder than hunger ever had. Calder took one step down the porch, boots landing like punctuation. "It's freezing tonight," he said. "Kids'll get sick before sunrise." "That ain't my decision," the sheriff muttered. "Town says you're setting a precedent, taking in strays, offering what others won't." Calder's voice dropped, low as thunder before a storm breaks. "That's not a crime." "Maybe not," Kincaid replied, "but fear makes its own laws." Ella felt humiliation rise again, the familiar choke of being considered a burden, a problem, a rumor, not a person. She placed a hand on May's shoulder, as if bracing herself from blowing away. "We'll go," she whispered. Calder turned sharply. "No. You won't." It wasn't force, it was a vow. For the first time since she met him, his stillness cracked, revealing fire beneath. Calder saddled his horse, tied the reins to the porch rail, then walked back to Ella, slow, intentional, like a man approaching a cliff he fully intended to leap from. "You're not leaving this ranch," he said. "Not while I've breath left to protect it." Ella shook her head. "You don't owe us anything." "I don't," he agreed. "But I want to." The simplicity nearly shattered her. He looked at May and Jonah, really looked. Kids shouldn't learn that the world turns its back when they need it most. He paused, breath shivering through him. "I learned that lesson young. Been trying to unlearn it ever since." There it was, the wound he'd never named. The reason his house was too quiet. The reason he gathered solitude like others gathered crops. Ella opened her mouth, but no words came. Hunger had stolen language. Kindness was slowly restoring it. By afternoon, Dusthaven arrived, not with torches or rifles, but with folded arms and pointed stares. 20 townsfolk stood at the ranch gate, dressed in Sunday righteousness. Martha DeWitt led them, posture stiff enough to splinter. "We're here for the widow," she announced. "This arrangement is improper. It threatens the moral standing of Dusthaven." Jonah pressed against Ella's side. May whispered, "Mama, don't let them take us." Ella didn't plan her answer. She just breathed. And sometimes breathing is the bravest act in a room full of judgment. But Calder stepped between them and the crowd, not aggressively, just solidly, like a wall built from quiet purpose. "You want her gone," he said. "Then you'll have to explain why." Martha blinked. "Because it looks indecent." "From where I'm standing," Calder replied, voice steady, "what's indecent is letting children starve in the street while you bake pies for church socials." A ripple of discomfort moved through the group. Kincaid shifted his weight, eyes narrowing, not at Calder, but at the town he suddenly recognized too well. "No one here is starving," Martha argued. "You didn't look long enough to notice," Calder said. Silence spread, thick, undeniable. Ella tried stepping forward, but Calder gently lifted a hand, not to silence her, but to offer rest, just this once. "I've lived alone long enough," he continued. "Worked this land alone, fixed fences alone, buried a wife alone. I figured that's how life was supposed to stay." He inhaled, voice cracking, not weak, but human. Then a mother and her kids showed up hungry, and for the first time in years, this ranch felt alive again. Ella's breath hitched. "This is their home now," Calder finished. "And I'll give them my name to prove it." Gasps broke through the crowd, sharp, disbelieving, scandalized. Ella's knees nearly buckled. He wasn't proposing romance. He wasn't asking for anything. He was offering shelter that couldn't be taken, legal, permanent, unquestionable. Martha sputtered, "Marriage? To a woman you barely know." Calder's eyes softened, not defensive, but resolute. "Knowing someone," he said, "isn't about time. It's about what they carry, and how they carry it." Kincaid finally stepped forward. "Town has no authority over a married woman. If Boone says she belongs here, then she does." Belongs. Ella closed her eyes, letting the words settle into every forgotten corner of her. Martha turned, defeated by a truth she never planned to confront. Townsfolk dispersed, each carrying a mirror they hadn't wanted to look into. And just like that, the storm passed. Not with thunder. With accountability. The ranch grew warmer in the hours after, firelight glowing brighter, meals tasting richer, breaths feeling easier. Jonah chased chickens. May braided wildflowers into a crown and placed it on Calder's table like a coronation. Ella stood at the edge of the corral, watching the sunset bleed gold into the horizon. The sky looked different, wider, kinder. Calder approached quietly, hands still dusty from work. He didn't reach for her. He just stood close enough that she felt his presence like shelter. "You don't owe me marriage," Ella murmured. "I know," he replied. "And I won't ask until you want it." She looked at him, the man who offered bread instead of pity, space instead of ownership, safety instead of rescue. "Calder Boone," she whispered, voice trembling like the first leaf of spring, "you already gave us more than most men would." He shook his head slowly. "No. You gave me something first." She blinked. "What?" "A reason to come home." The words landed softly, like hay drifting into place. They didn't kiss, not yet. Some stories deserve a longer climb. Instead, Ella reached for his hand, and he let her take it, palm worn, warm, unafraid. Two lives, once splintered, now choosing to lean. That night, as the children slept, the wind returned, but not hollow, not mournful. It carried the scent of bread baking in the kitchen, wood smoke curling toward heaven, and a future pieced together through patience, not urgency. Ella looked up at the stars, bright, unapologetic, and whispered a truth she finally believed. "We're not leaving." No one answered. The prairie didn't need to. Staying was the reply. Hope didn't arrive as thunder or salvation. It settled slowly, like sunrise learning how to fill a room. And on that ranch, under a sky still wide enough for second chances, Eleanor Hartwell became Eleanor Boone, not by hunger, not by desperation, but by choice. Where judgment once stood tall, grace now towered higher.